You're watching PEGRI TV, Rhode Island's public access channel.
Hello, my name is Selena. This is Bible Tea Time for Children.
The Holy Scriptures. Let the word bring you joy and knowledge.
Welcome back to part 2. We have the same guests with me from the other show, and they're here.
And we're from Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
Thank you for having us back.
You're welcome. Now we're going to talk about what else you wanted to say on the other show.
Well, we ran out of time to say in the other show. Well, to start off, what would you say, Mr. Keith?
I would say that, again, we love having children coming to the mill, and children as young as you would work there all day long. And then, do you remember what you do on Sundays?
Go to school.
You go to school right in the mill. And when the mill first opened up, Mr. Samuel Slater himself was the teacher for the children. And he used to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, but also about the Bible, too. He was a Bible teacher, too, just like you were reading from the Bible.
So what this tells me is that the children who worked in the mill, they weren't away from the mill for very long, because they're working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Oh, a little shorter work day on Saturday. They would only work from 6:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon. So
But
that's a shorter day for them. But then on Sundays, they start off with usually a 2 to 3 hour church service. Then it was going back into Slater Mill at noontime, and from noon till 5 in the afternoon, they're learning about other schooling. They're learning Bible teaching, of course, but also about history, mathematics, writing, penmanship. They're learning a full curriculum at the mill. So they're having their school right in the mill on Sundays. And then it's back to work on Monday morning at 6:30. And they hear the factory bell ringing, calling them into work.
That's one thing very important. You have to listen for the factory bell.
Would you like to wake up to a factory bell ringing? You would?
Because I like bells. They make loud noises.
This was
That
a
would
loud bell.
really wake up the children.
Oh yes, they wanted to make sure that everybody woke up, came to the mill for working.
And it was very noisy, so they had to get up.
Yeah, I wonder what that felt like. Say a child was growing up on a farm, and on the farm you wake up when the rooster crows and the sun comes up.
That's right.
And you go to bed at sunset, and they get to keep or sell what wares they make. Now it's all changing. Now when a child goes to work in a mill, like Slater's mill, where they spun cotton thread, then they hear the factory bell. Boing, boing, boing. That's what's getting them up in the morning. Second bell rings, boing, boing, boing. That means leave your house. Third bell, boing, boing, boing. That's 6:30 in the morning. That starts your work day. And the next time you hear a bell is probably when you go home at 6:30 at night. That's a little different from working on the farm. Very different, in fact. And I'll tell you, Mr. Slater had trouble keeping children working in the mill because a lot of these children came from farms. And in the springtime, when it was time to sow and plant, then the parents would take their children out of the mills because they needed them to work back home at the farm. And then in the fall, in the autumn, the children had to be around the farm to harvest and reap. So in the spring and then in the fall, the children couldn't work in the mill anymore. They had to go back home, work on their family's farm. Then they might come back in wintertime or in summer to work in the mill.
Now, you've been to Slater Mill. You know we have a garden there.
Yes.
Did you see our nice garden at Slater Mill? We grow all sorts of things. We grow potatoes, different kinds of vegetables. We used
Blueberries.
To grow blueberries, yes, all sorts of things we grow.
Onions.
Onions?
You saw the onions? Yeah, they have some big onion plants there.
Yeah, big onion plants, yes. Yep, all sorts of vegetables. The only thing we don't grow tomatoes.
Tomatoes. seeds, they come out when you take a bite.
Yes, the seeds come out when you take a bite. But you know why they didn't grow tomatoes?
Why?
Because people used to think they were poisonous. They'd make you sick.
That's what people thought. They were wrong.
Now we know they taste good and they're good for you. But back then, people didn't know any better.
I've tasted tomato before.
And they taste
I like
very
the
good.
juice.
You like the juice when the juice comes out of them, right? When you eat a salad?
I want to ask you a question, Miss Selena. Is a tomato a fruit or is a tomato a vegetable?
Fruit vegetable.
I guess that's the best answer, yeah.
That's right. That's
Because
absolutely
they call it a
correct.
vegetable when it's sliced and on your plate. When it's growing, it's a fruit. Maybe we could have you working at Slater Mill. You could stand there at the driveway and ask people to come in and say, hello, welcome to Slater Mill. And we'll pay you 35 cents a week, just as they did in the old days. How does that sound? I don't know, 35 cents doesn't buy you very much these days.
And our garden looks very, very nice there because we have master gardeners from the University of Rhode Island taking care of our garden. And when the vegetables are grown, they donate the vegetables to the Rhode Island Food Bank. So nothing goes to waste.
The food bank is where the food gets to looking at the food to make sure that the food doesn't rot.
That's true. Very good. We want it nice and fresh, don't we?
Yeah, so then when they put it in the food truck, then they could give it to the store.
That's right, to the store, or sometimes to people that really can't afford to buy vegetables. So that's why we have the Rhode Island Food Bank.
Did you want to hear anything more about Mr. Slater? Or have we talked enough about Mr. Samuel Slater?
More about him.
Well, when Samuel Slater came to America, and again he had come from the town of Belper in England, and he brought with him that knowledge of the water-powered spinning machines. He had memorized the workings of the British machines that spun cotton plant into thread and yarn. And when he came to America, he was just 22 years old. But he had a lot going for him. He had the knowledge of how to work those machines and how to manage a mill. And he had a lot of ambition. He wanted to get ahead. You see, Mr. Slater could have had a respectable living if he had behaved himself and remained back there in England. He was the son of landowners, and he had a respectable trade, working in the mill. But his ambitions, his goals, ran higher. Now, when Samuel Slater came to America, that was November 1789, came to Pawtucket in 1790. He originally landed in New York Harbor. And when Samuel Slater arrived in America, he had some sixpence in his pockets, some of his father's inheritance to live off. In fact, Samuel Slater had forfeited most of his father's inheritance, all that money he would have gotten when he came to America. But by the 1820s, Samuel Slater outright owned 13 mills. Had 13 mills that he owned. Many of them were larger than Slater mills. Some were in Massachusetts, some in Connecticut. He had interest in 18 other businesses, and he had a personal worth of over $10 million.
Can you imagine that? Over $10 million in the 1820s and 30s?
And back in the 1820s and 30s, a really good week's salary was just $10 a week. So he was one of the richest men in the country back then. And 2 years before Mr. Slater passed on, President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, President Jackson came to see Samuel Slater at Slater's home in Webster, Massachusetts, and the president called Samuel Slater the father of American manufacturers. And that's what we called Mr. Samuel Slater ever since, the father of American manufacturers.
We've had 2 presidents of the United States come and visit Slater Mill.
Yes, I didn't see them, but they have.
No, we didn't meet them
Yeah.
because it was a long time ago. But President Monroe and President Jackson both came to visit Slater Mill, and they took a tour of Slater Mill just as people do today.
And First Lady Laura Bush, married to George W. Bush, she almost came to Slater Mill, but she had too many things to do that day.
George Bush?
George Bush, so he didn't come to Slater Mill, no. His wife, Laura Bush, almost did, but she ran out of time. But you know, the people in England, they don't say the father of American manufacturers. When they hear about Mr. Slater, especially the people who live in Belper, and that was the town Samuel Slater came from, you know what they'll say about Mr. Slater?
What?
They'll still say, Slater the traitor. How about that? Slater the traitor.
That's because he took the secrets of the machines and brought them over here. Not the machines, but the ideas.
And a traitor is somebody who breaks their word, goes back in their promise. And Samuel Slater, when he was a young man, he had promised never to do that, never to reveal the trade secrets taught to him in the mill by his master, Jedediah Strutt. But then again, Samuel Slater could only go so far if he had stayed back there in England, so he set his sights on America, which even in the 1780s was thought of as being the land of new chances and new opportunities, especially for the cotton spinning business. So it turned out it was a good move for Samuel Slater to come to America. It was good for him, and it was good for our country.
We're very glad he did come over here, too, because we wouldn't have Slater Mill without Samuel Slater, right?
And we wouldn't have much to talk about today,
That's
would we?
right. It wouldn't be there.
Let me ask you a question, Selena, although it's your show, but I wanted to ask you a question. Mr. Slater came here back all those many years ago, and he brought the knowledge of the machines over here from England to America. It wasn't supposed to do that. At least the English people thought he was wrong to do that. Was Samuel Slater a hero, a really good guy, the hero of the factories of the American Industrial Revolution? Or was Samuel Slater a traitor? Somebody who broke his promise. What do you say? Hero or traitor? You're saying what?
Traitor.
Traitor? She votes traitor. You were born in England? You sound like an English person when you say that. Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, I think he was probably both. Just like a tomato is a vegetable and a fruit, I think Mr. Slater was probably a hero and a traitor. It could depend on which side of the ocean you're on.
And when he came to this country, he was what's called an immigrant. Meaning he came from another country to live and to work. See?
My mom told me that.
She told you that? Wonderful. And he had a good advantage that he already spoke English because he came from England. He spoke English and he knew a lot about the English machines. So he was all prepared when he came here.
We're really a country of immigrants. Unless you're a Native American, an American Indian, you are an immigrant or you have ancestors that came over here from another country, immigrated or emigrated here from another country. What else you want to talk about?
What were the machines made out of?
That's a good question. What were the machines made out of? Well, a lot of them were made out of iron. They used a lot of iron that they dug out of the ground, and they had to smelt it. That means they melt it down, they shape it, and they dug that right out of the ground right around Pawtucket. So a lot of the machines were made by iron. They're made from iron, but they had a lot of wood in them too.
Yeah, the further back in time you go, and you look at these old machines, I'm saying 200 years old, you find a lot of them had wooden parts, wooden frames and stands. Then the more advanced the machines become, the more metal they use. And some of them, by the mid-1800s, most of them are all iron and steel.
Want to see something?
Yeah, I want to see something. What do you got?
It's something like wood. It's a wood machine over here.
A wood machine, is that the picture we were looking at?
Yeah,
It's almost all wood.
Let me show everybody.
You can show everybody. If you can find the page in time. But there's a picture. I know what you're looking for, the carding frame. You've got it. Well, that shows an old machine, yeah, where they're spinning. That shows Slater Mill as it used to look. We're still looking for, there it is, the carding frame. That's that machine up there.
And that's right at Slater Mill.
Can we get that? Yes.
You know, some of our machines are more than 200 years old at Slater Mill.
And that's an old machine. That's a round machine, and that was used to brush the cotton that would be spun into yarn. But before you spin it into yarn and thread, you have to brush it, and that's what this machine did. It worked a lot faster than brushing the cotton by hand.
And it ran by water power.
You all kind of see that? It's a little picture, but that's what it looks like. And you can find that machine in Slater Mill. It's on display.
going to talk about the Slater Mill.
Anything you want to hear about Slater Mill? Like how much fun it was to work there? Well, not really.
I'll tell you something about Slater Mill. Back in the time of Mr. Slater, they couldn't simply flick on a switch and everything runs. They had to use a certain kind of power, and that was water power.
So it came from the water from the lake, and then
Right,
it came
right from the
sucked in.
Blackstone River.
And then it came, and then it sucked through to the machines, so then the machines would work.
That's exactly right. You have been studying. Yes, that's how the machines would work, by water power. It would come right from the Blackstone River, right into the mill, and work the machines. And that's why the Slater Mill and the Wilkinson Mill are built right next to the Blackstone River so they could harness the power of the river.
See, right next to Slater Mill is this wonderful river with a steep decline. Drops down rapidly, and that's the Blackstone River. Now, the Blackstone River is not as wide nor grand as the Mississippi River or the Hudson River, but it has a sharp drop, and that's why they used the Blackstone River to power their mills, because they could easily divert the current of the water, pull it in underneath the mills, make the water wheels turn, which made the pulley belts turn, and ran the machines, all with water power.
That's right. There were only two problems with that. One problem, in the summertime, a lot of the water dries up and they didn't have enough water power, so they couldn't run the machines. Some people had to go home without pay. And there's a second problem. That's when we have floods, not as often as we have the river drying up.
Because then the water that comes from a different lake goes in there, and then it overflows, and then water comes through, and it goes on land.
That's exactly right. Very true.
You
Very
understand
good.
a lot about water, don't you? Yes. Oh, by the way, Slater Mill, before the Yellow Mill that you visited, before the Yellow Mill was built, the first Slater Mill was in a Fuller Mill, a factory where Moses Brown rented some space, and that began operations in December 1790. And that first Slater Mill was opened with a staff of 2 adults and 9 children. When I say children, you know, I mean 6, 7, 8 years old.
The book says that.
What's that?
The book says that,
The
yes.
book says that, tells you about it. And then more children and more children were brought into work in the mill. You see, children have small, like look at your hand next to mine. Let's see. Your fingers are a lot smaller than ours.
Yes.
Look at that. Now, wouldn't she be better at changing spools of thread in the mill and cleaning old machines and dusting? Wouldn't that be better if you were working on that machine instead of me? Yeah. Also, you don't have to pay the child as much as a skilled adult worker. So
You
there
know
were
how
some
old the
good
boss
reasons.
was at Slater Mill when it first started? When the business first started, the boss was 10 years old. 10 years old, but most of the workers were younger than him.
His name was Smith, Mr. Smith Wilkinson. Yep. He was a foreman when he was 10 years old, and he was in charge of the carding department where they would brush the cotton, getting it
So
ready
they
for
would
spinning.
get all the cotton in something, and then they would like push it to here.
Yes, it's a complicated process. There's a lot you have to do to cotton to turn it into thread. They have to brush it. First of all, they have to get the seeds out. Then they would have to brush it. Then they need to spin it. Then they need to put it through another machine that spins it again, and then you have the thread, natural cotton thread. Like some of the clothes you're wearing are made out of cotton. Your apron and your bonnet are made of cotton.
Cotton comes from sheep.
Well, it looks like it does. Actually, the cotton plant is grown down in a plantation in a field, white cotton. But I'll tell you,
You have a
sometimes you
cotton
can't tell.
plant here.
What?
You have a cotton plant at the place.
Yes, we do. We have some cotton plants. But normally cotton would not be grown down in the, well, it would be grown down in the south, but not in the north, up where we are. Originally, the cotton plant was, much of it still is grown down in the south. In the southern colonies, it became the southern United States. It would be harvested, de-seeded, then shipped over to England, where in the English mills, it was processed, made into cotton yarn and cloth. Then some of that cotton shipped back to America with the hefty taxes levied on it. Now, when the cotton mills were built and opened here in America, beginning right at Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, then that processing was done here in America. But at Slater Mill site, as you saw in the garden, we do have some cotton plants. That's just to show what the cotton looks like when it's growing.
Now, in other parts of Rhode Island and Massachusetts, they had mills that worked with wool. And of course, wool comes from sheep, and that's what they would process. But Slater Mill was the first mill in all of America to process cotton into yarn and thread. It was the first one.
A lot of things happen right in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. But wool, of course, is used for making clothes too. You can have wool mittens, a wool sweater. Wool was very important too. But a lot of people like cotton better because cotton is more breathable. You don't sweat so much when you're wearing cotton. And it kind of feels better on your skin. But there are very nice wool mittens and sweaters and scarves. So wool's important too. That's the sheep's hair.
Do you have anything else to say?
Well, some of the things you said, you sound like you've actually worked at the mill. You know so much about it.
And you're dressed as a little girl would be dressed back when the mill was open. And
Yeah, show everybody how you're dressed. Turn around and show everybody that this is how a young girl would dress at the mill.
Yes. Of course, you're dressed kind of fancy to be a mill worker. That's when your clothes are new, before they get stained with oil and grease and tattered.
When they get stained, then the color comes off.
Yes, the color comes off and they get all blotchy. Their clothes wouldn't be too pretty after a while working in the mill. But you look very authentic. You look like you're right from those times.
In fact, do you know before we had the mills like Slater Mill, you might only have 1 or 2 dresses for a year. Can you imagine wearing the same 2 dresses all year? Because clothes were so hard to make. You had to make everything by hand. That's
So
when the
we-
factories came in and you could make cloth a lot faster.
So you'd probably have your dress
So it
for
comes
working
like-
in the mill,
Yes.
and then your Sunday best, your dress for church. And those
So it
would be
went
the 2
like-
outfits you'd have. You like that outfit, don't you? You got a lot of lace on it, and pretty blue, pretty white.
Yes,
That's
and
pretty
lace had to be made by hand too before we had the factories. Lace had to be made all by hand.
Here's
It took a
lace.
long, long time.
This is lace.
That's lace, that's right.
So if you came into the mill dressed like you are now, well, they'd probably say, that must be the mill owner's daughter, because she's dressed pretty fancy. Your clothes are all new and clean.
Well, we want to thank you very much for having us on today. Thank you for inviting us.
As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
you think you'll have us back? Because we have more to say about Slater Mill.
Slater Mill's been around for a long time, and it will continue to be there for a long time.
You can tell we work there, don't you? Well, this is something how we'd be dressed as mill workers. I'd be kind of a boss dressed in this jacket. I'd be a mill foreman in my nice fancy brocade coat.
You really do look like you work there.
I really look like I belong there, and I work there. Hey, plus, I'm wearing black, so you don't see all the grease stains when I'm working in the mill. If you wear dark clothes, they don't see how messy you really are.
And black was one of the colors in those days.
Yes, most people, most men, would like to be dressed in black. It was a very dignified color, not too fancy.
Plus, dyes like blue, they were very expensive. Very, very expensive.
A rich person had to have this color.
That's exactly right. A rich person would wear blue, something like that.
children of the old Slater mill worked very hard. Life was not easy or fun for them. They missed out on a lot of things that children enjoy, like playing, running around, being outside in open air, and just having fun. It was not a happy time for the children who worked here at the old Slater mill. It was hard work. And the work was not good for them either. They sometimes lost their fingers, their eyes, and sometimes even their lives. They even had a whipping room where they would whip the children, so they had to work. And because they lived away from their families, they had no one to help or comfort them when they were sad, hungry, tired, or in pain. The machines were designed to make money. It seemed like no one cared or thought about the safety of the children because the machines were super dangerous for them. So a lot of children cried here. But did you know that God bottles our tears? The Bible says that God does this because our tears are special to Him. And the children of the old Slater mill are not living on earth anymore. But did you know that the children of God never die? And we get new bodies, you see? God is eternal. That means He lives forever. It never dies. And if you belong to Him, you will too. And that goes for the children of God from the old Slater mill. Oh yeah. And they'll all get their fingers back. New and better, with lots of playtime. Thank you for being on my show.
Well, it's been our pleasure. I think I
Our
can speak
pleasure.
for both of us.
Thank
yes.
you for asking us.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you for inviting us on your show, Selena.
You're welcome.
You going to have us back again? Maybe we'll do part 3. There's always something more to talk about.
Yes. See you next time on Bible Tea Time for Children. Bye-bye.